Hey everybody, thank you for joining us again here on the Sweet Ever After as we tackle another topic involving marriage and relationships. I am once again, of course, joined by my beautiful co-host and the most amazing person in my life, Sydney. How are you, babe?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So just to be honest with you guys, today's episode, we have no notes. We
Just going to see what happens.
haven't really discussed this much except knowing the topic going into it. But today's episode is entitled Let's Talk. So it's all about communication. And the importance of communication in your marriage.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, we have a lot of experience with bad communication.
Yep.
So, I don't think it's going to be hard for us to find things to talk about, of things to especially not do, and things that we have found that works better. But I'll go and throw this, I'll just throw myself under the bus right away. I feel like that's probably the best way to start this off. I know early on when we first got married, and we didn't date very long
just
at all.
a few minutes.
About 20 minutes, and then we got married. And so really getting to know each other, and you don't really know somebody until you're really living with them.
Yes.
You really discover some things. Because I remember I was under the impression that you were a neat freak.
That's an illusion.
Yeah, that was trickery.
That was my mother. Thank you, Mom, because that was not me.
Figured that out real quick, that you are not a neat freak. And I, in fact, was the neat freak, which was a weird
It was
turn.
very strange, especially when we got that vacuum cleaner, and you would just, that was
such
hilarious.
a nice vacuum, though. That Dyson,
Yeah.
Oh, that thing was sick. It had the ball, and
Yeah.
oh, man. Anyway, so I discovered I enjoyed vacuuming and taking care of things, so that was weird. But in communication, I know for me early on, I just tried to, I like to make peace. I like to keep things peaceful. And so when things bothered me, I didn't really want to talk about it. And so one of the things we're talking about with this is like, let's talk, is that we really have to be open and honest, right, when we're dealing with something and something that we're not happy with. Because a lot of times we'll just say, well, that's fine, or it's whatever. And I think a lot of men can relate to what I'm saying, because I think a lot of men do this, is we'll just not really confront it, because we'll say, well, it's okay, or we'll say, it doesn't really bother me that bad. But then what happens is it begins to build. And so what would happen to me is I would take all this stuff, and then finally I would reach a breaking point, and you would do something that really wasn't that severe, right? But it was just a thing that really just broke the camel's back, right? It just, everything would come crashing down, and then it was just like, blah, it would just all come out, which is a horrible way to communicate to your spouse, to bottle things up until you blow up. And then I would just create this big wake of destruction with my words, and then later have to come back and clean that up. And then I couldn't even pinpoint really what was wrong, because I had let things go by so much, and even the things that I brought up to you, sometimes you wouldn't even remember, because it was a while back, and it's like, well, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah, I could have addressed that. Then.
So I want to ask you this: what do you think, for you personally, what's been helpful that I do now? As far as our communication goes with that kind of stuff, like when I have an issue and I do bring it to you, what's a helpful way that you've noticed that, or that you receive information best, as far as me, your husband, bringing to you and kind of bringing up an issue that I may have?
Yeah, I think that you also, you weren't great at this at first, but you've gotten better, is noticing what time of day and when to bring things up. If I'm doing something that's involving a lot of focus and you bring something to me that's really, really heavy, it's very hard for me to switch over and to listen to that. So you've gotten a lot better at knowing, hey, are you in the right headspace right now for me to share stuff with you? You did have the mess ups of when you would tell me these things right before bed. And then I would be like, I've stayed up until 3 a.m. worrying about the things that you unloaded, and you're peacefully sound asleep after you've already unloaded it on me. And I'm like, what do I do with this? So I'm like, please, mid-afternoon is a good time for me. Not morning and not late at night. So mid-afternoon. And just making sure that I'm listening to you and you have my full attention. And then also you will ask sometimes, hey, are you able to let me unload right now? Because sometimes I'm like, hey, I'm not in the best headspace right now, so can we try after lunch or something?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I think learning how to speak to each other, and also going through, because you're not going to know right off the bat either, of getting to know each other better, of how that person best receives information, and sometimes it changes too. Sometimes we grow and we change, and our preferences change, and so that's why it's so important to stay in constant communication. Because sometimes it's like, hey, like I used to tell you don't do that, but like that really doesn't bother me anymore. And in fact, I'd prefer that you tell me this, or you tell me that. But I do know one thing I've learned about you is like you prefer, like when there's a financial situation, when there's something going on that is a stressful situation, you would prefer me not bring it to you without a plan.
Yes,
right?
I need
like,
a plan.
Without a so I'm not gonna tell you that, oh my God, I don't know how I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna wait, and I'm gonna pray through it, and I'm gonna work through it, and I'm gonna seek people that I go to for godly counsel, and I'm gonna develop a plan of what are we going to do, so that way when I do bring you in on the situation, which again is your preference, that not everybody is this way, that's why it's important to communicate and talk, but then once I have a plan, is bring it to you, say, hey, look, here's what's going on, we're in a bit of a pickle here, but here's the plan, here's what we can do, here's A, B, C, and I just need your help on this.
Yeah, because before, when you would just do that, I would be like, do I need to go sell a kidney? What do I need to do?
Oh, yeah, you were constantly like, I'm going to sell this, I'm going to sell
like,
that. And I was like, no, I'm still trying to figure it out. And then I realized that, and through talking with you, right, is again being honest with communication, which I think communication being one of the number one issues, obviously, that marriages struggle with. Good communication, just talking to each other, and actually communicating and dealing with feelings, dealing with hurts and pains, dealing with situations. Early on, I mean, we had to have discussions about how are we going to load the dishwasher, how are we going to put our cups away.
There is a method. Okay, there's a method.
I think you just get them in there, and
there's
it's
a method
fine,
so that you can have like max occupancy of all the things.
No, for sure. So, but communicating on those things, I think one of the two top things that people deal with in marriage, or what they fight about the most, is money and sex. And so for me, when I think about that, though, I think both of those get solved when you have good communication.
Yes.
Because you communicate of like, okay, what are we doing about the money? Right? Who's handling the money? Who's budgeting things? And then the other person is then, okay, I'm lining up with, that, which, I know that was something you struggled with a lot early on.
Yes, because budget was a bad word for me, okay?
What do you mean no? What does that mean?
No was a bad word for me. But you've learned to communicate to me of, hey, not right now, we can come back to that. And most likely I've already forgotten about it later on.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that too, of the like you listening and not have already bought it when you're actually bringing it up to me. So that's nice. That's been a good development. But I think in those kind of things too, early on in marriage, is one of the things when we sit down with married couples, before they get married, in that process of premarital counseling or just talking to them in general, is even asking them like, hey, what are your expectations? Right? Going into this, what are you expecting from your spouse? Like, what do you think your wife is actually going to do? Like, and you can tell that they haven't talked about it, because they start like, you hear guys start saying, well, I think she's gonna be cooking dinner almost every night, and then she's gonna be, and then you see her face,
like, what?
So you're like, y'all haven't talked about this, and so which is why we ask those questions, because most likely they haven't. They're just so, we're gonna have a life together, and oh my God,
live happily ever after,
and then real life is just like smack, and then all of a sudden it's like there's all this frustration because there's these unrealistic expectations you had that you never communicated to them.
Resentment but it's unfair because you're holding resentment towards your spouse for these unrealistic expectations that you're holding. But you never even told them about them. So how can they even try to meet those expectations if they're not unaware of them?
They can't.
So,
and if you're not communicating, which I think you can speak to this as far as the way things have improved with us, is when you did figure that out, which we talked a little bit in the first episode of this whole thing, but when you did figure out that magic thing of if you just tell me what you want, right? Like, because I want to make you happy.
Yes, and I want to be happy. So let me help you help me.
And tell me what you need, what you want, and I'll do those things. But I'm not a mind reader. And as you well know, and even sometimes I've gotten better, I feel like, picking up on nonverbal cues
Yes.
that you have,
Yeah.
just from being married to you and such a glorious amount of time that I have been,
Yeah.
and be able to read you better. But at the same time, it's still helpful knowing like, hey, I need this right now, or
Yeah.
hey, or even the times where there's tension going on, where you've got a lot happening, and in those communicating those moments of like, hey, what do you need from me right now?
Yeah.
Do you need me to just hold you and say, oh, that's so bad.
Yeah.
I feel so bad
Yeah.
for you, or is this something that like you need me to take action and fix
Yeah.
and change?
'Cause that's something that I learned to do too, because I have to talk things out to process them. So
Yeah.
I learned if I just need you to listen to me, that I just tell you, hey, I just need you to listen, or just let me talk this out to you.
Yeah.
I don't need you to fix this, because I would notice early on when I would talk to you about things, you would already start in your mind. Like
Yeah.
I could see it.
I'm
Like
gonna
you
fix
were
it.
already like starting a plan of how to fix this. And I was like, I just need you to listen to me. Like I don't need you to fix it. So I just tell you these things like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm about to just unload on you, and I just need you to listen.
Just listen, yeah, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Although I still would like to fix it, because I
Yes.
feel like sometimes I could fix it if you just let me fix it. But
Yeah.
that's just innate in me, and I think a lot of men deal with that as well. It's like, well, hey, I want to make it better.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing if I could encourage women listening to this is to know, like, to recognize the heart of your husband and the fact that he wants to help you.
Yeah.
Like he really does. And sometimes he just doesn't know how.
Yeah.
And I feel like communication does give us the right tools
Yeah.
to, like, healthy communication, and describing what's wrong and describing what we need and being honest, not being afraid. And that's the other thing is like, you have to be willing to also hear some negative,
Yeah.
right? Like if I ask you, hey, how am I doing as a husband?
Mm-hmm.
And there's really an area that I could improve on, but you don't want to tell me because you also don't want to hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
I think that's where we have to get a little more bold in
Yeah.
confrontation, is because like if you want it to change, you're gonna have to say something.
Yeah, but I think approaching the conversation of, hey, I want to discuss something with you, but I don't want you to take this personal. I just think that it's something that can be worked on, and I also have stuff to work on.
Yeah.
But it's like just approaching it so where you can disarm them in the first place, instead of just being like, you do this and I would like you to not do it. Like, because a lot of times I would do that, and like
Yeah.
it would come out as you would deflect on things just for feeling guilty.
Mm-hmm.
So then I would get mad that you were deflecting the things that I was trying to point out. So we had to
Yeah.
work on how can we properly communicate these things to
Yeah.
discuss hard stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I think even if you said it, I mean, you can say that, hey, this isn't personal, but I feel like it is always personal. And so that's the thing is like, it is though. It's personal. And that's okay.
Yeah, but it's not meant to hurt.
No,
the other
your
person.
goal is not to
Yeah.
hurt. No, of course not. And that's not what we're trying to do. And that's why we're trying to talk about it, is because like we want to avoid what would later down the road be a disaster,
Yeah,
or
or-
somebody being miserable.
Yeah, and or resentment. That's
Yeah.
like, hey, like I just feel like we could go ahead and like catch this when it's something small and catch it low.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And I think, again, communication up front, like I'll give you an example. Before we got married, we did communicate about this and communicated through our marriage about it, and we're in it now, about the fact that you wanted to adopt, right? You said, hey, I want to adopt. Like, that's it on my heart. I really want to adopt, and like that's actually a deal breaker for me.
Yeah,
Like,
it
if
was.
you don't want to adopt, I'm not going to marry
Yeah.
you. And I mean, thankfully, I was on board. I was like,
Yeah.
yes, I
Yes.
do want to adopt as well. I'd like to adopt a couple kids, like, and we now have a son that we have adopted, and so, in which that was a whole thing in itself.
Yeah.
But we talked early on and going in, and I think that's so important too for married couples now. Even if you just got married, I would say especially if you're not married yet and you're with somebody, you've gotten engaged, or you're about to get married, is really communicate what is hard lines for you.
Yeah.
Because don't just assume they know.
Yeah.
Because they probably don't. Especially if you're a woman and you're assuming your man knows, he doesn't know.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you right now, he doesn't know. He has no idea. So you need to say
And
it.
if you've already told him, tell him again.
Yeah, tell him again. Tell him again.
Yeah.
Don't just assume, because I think that is one of the biggest mistakes that we can make,
Yeah.
is not use our words,
Yeah.
not communicate those things, which is something I think we dealt with quite a bit when it comes to just saying I love you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I just assumed you knew I loved you because of everything I would do. Like I showed up, I took care of you. I wasn't mean. I wasn't, I provided, I worked hard, all these kind of things. I thought all of this, which yes, it does. My actions show you that I love you.
Yeah.
Right. But there's something for women, I think in particular, which maybe you speak to this, why this is. I don't even know if you understand why, but that you just need to hear it.
Yeah.
You need me to actually say it on a daily basis that I love you.
Yeah, because it does something in our brain just for you to
Just
to
figure
just
that
say
out,
those
just in
words.
that chaotic space
Yes.
that is the brain,
Yes.
the
Yes.
female brain, is
Yes.
it does something.
And also for women, I feel like I just assumed that men thought like we did. And that's not
No.
true. Because it blows my mind that men can literally think of nothing. I don't understand that. But
it's very relaxing.
I imagine so.
Just not to
that
think.
would be great, but we cannot. So just understanding that we were made differently, and
Yeah.
that women are supposed to be the helpmate and not as like a beneath you, but we're partners in this,
Yeah,
and to
yeah.
help you, help me.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we have to communicate these
Yeah.
things and tell each other what we want. And I remember saying I would need you to tell me, hey, I need you to tell me I'm pretty today, or I would give you a long list of hey, I need you to say this entire sentence today.
Yeah.
That's what I need to hear, and you would do it.
Yeah.
And at first, it felt like, oh, he should just want to say these
Yeah,
things,
or
and he should just
know.
know to do
Yeah.
these things. And you want to do these
Yeah.
things, you just didn't know.
Yeah.
So that was unfair for me in a way to just expect you to do these things and then resent you for not doing them.
Yeah.
When you wanted to do them, you just didn't know. So
Yeah.
it's like once I had that light bulb moment, I was like, I just need to help you.
Yeah.
Help me.
Yeah.
And then once you started to learn how I received love and things like that, and what I needed in moments, I had to, I don't have to say stuff all the time, but
Yeah.
I still do. But
Well, no, and I appreciate it, but I think it does help though. For me, what I can speak from my experience is for you being very clear in your communication with things, especially if I need to go find something and it's in the pantry, and try and be as clear as possible for me to find it. But you being clear though in general in your communication helps me also learn of what to look for and things like that. Like when I see you going, I just don't like my hair, or I just don't like immediately know, okay, now I need to come in with the rush of compliments because right now she's feeling insecure about her appearance. And so I'm going to just go in and do that. I'm just going to go, no, you're beautiful. And I think you look amazing. I love your hair. And so and you're going to immediately see the results of that, of you being like, oh, okay. You kind of calm down and everything. Oh, actually it does work. It's fine. And so recognize, but again, that's because you did take the time to tell me, hey, when I'm kind of feeling this way, can you tell me,
or sometimes I remember even telling you hey, I need you to tell me this, and then you would do it, and I was like, can you try it in this tone, and you would do it. I would be like, can you redo that, but in a different tone, because I needed it in a different tone.
Well, I'm sorry it took me a minute, but
But you
I
got
feel like
there.
I got
You
there.
got there.
I
You
got
did.
there.
But I had to be very specific.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me as well, describing things, and again, I've gotten better at dealing with stuff when they really do bother me, and that's what I tell people too: is this a hill that I want to die on right now, or is this is this really something I want to fight about? Because I think there are certain things that it's in the grand scheme of things, not a big deal. And really just kind of think on it for a second and say, okay, this really doesn't need to be addressed because it's really not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I'm blowing it up into something it's not. But there are times, though, when things would happen or things did happen, arguments we had, or sometimes you would say things that implied a lot of stuff to me that was very insulting, and question character and all that kind of stuff and intention, and that's the kind of stuff which I know now.
Yes.
But that's the kind of stuff that would blow me up, would make
Yes.
me so upset. When
Yes.
if I felt like my character was being questioned, or I felt like my motives were being questioned, I would get super defensive, and so I'd be like, because just thinking everything I'm doing for you, and then and so it would set me off. And so now what I do is when something like that happens, I'll be like, hey, can you clarify? Hey, surely you're not suggesting that you think this,
Yes.
right? Or you think I meant this, and of saying that, oh, no, okay, no, that's unreasonable, or even have to take a break and say, hey, I'm sorry that, I said that, I didn't mean it like that. And, but again, it's much better when I would immediately address it instead of just take it in and be like, she doesn't respect me, she doesn't care, and then I just stew on that for weeks and weeks and weeks until finally, again, the blah all over, which I think a lot of men do. I think a lot of men will. They'll stew over something for a long time, and then they just keep adding to the catalog of things, and then all of a sudden it's like your subscription due is here.
Yeah.
Here it is,
Yeah.
and here's all the things you've done in the past 6 months. So that is not healthy because I mean, same vice versa too. Because I know women do it too. Of holding all this stuff and then finally freaking out and kind of letting it all out at one time.
Yeah.
And when you're handed something like that, it's like, well, what do I do about this?
Yeah.
And so it's not fair for either person. And so that's something I know I've personally had to work on and just be more open and honest about things that really do bother me. They're like, hey, I don't like that.
Yeah. Well, even in the moment of like being intentional of catching things low, like even when we're talking or, discussing different things, it's like, hey, I didn't like the tone. Can we like try it again? Because I know that you didn't mean it to be like where you seemed angry at me, but you just feel passionate about something. But can you like adjust your tone like mid conversation? So instead of just like letting it bother me, just being.
Well, and I think too, one of the things I like to say in the midst of disagreements is when I feel like you are, again, you start to get into that disrespect area, and same way with me, like where you're starting to feel not loved or not prioritized, right? Those are big things for both men and women that we deal with regularly. When I start feeling disrespected, I one of the statements I know I'll say when we're having a disagreement is like, that's not fair.
Yeah.
Like what you just said's not fair.
Yeah.
Like you've gone into an area that's not even, it's like how we say, we don't say always or never.
Yeah.
We don't threaten the relationship. So that's big in communication, which we've talked about in other episodes. Don't threaten your relationship. Don't use divorce. Don't use that language, when you're communicating, especially when you're arguing.
Yeah.
Because it does. It do. I remember that was something early on that you did a lot to me. It was like, well, I'll just leave. Or I guess, this just isn't going to work. Like, this just isn't going to work out. and that would always be like, oh, is she serious? Oh my, is she serious? Like, and it would just amplify everything. Even though the original argument, I mean, who even knows what it was about? Like it was a simple disagreement over a detergent or over how we make the bed. And all of a sudden it's you're leaving. Like, and that's the power of communication. Of bad communication, but then of healthy communication the other way, of how quickly, like you said, catching it low, which if you've heard that, we've said that a couple times now, or you've said that a couple times, just to be clear, like you're catching things with your spouse in communication. You hear things or something that doesn't sit right with you, and you're catching it while it's low.
Yeah.
You're not trying to address it when you're both at 100, screaming, and you're trying to have like some kind of intelligent discussion. Like it's not going to happen. Which this. I mean, for me in communication, like I don't respond well to screaming.
Yeah.
Like when you started, when you will start yelling at me, especially early on, it doesn't happen as much anymore. Occasionally get a little feisty, but when the screaming starts, that's when I start getting like because I don't want to yell.
Yeah.
And so it's like, but I'm being tempted to be drawn in to match your level.
Yeah.
And then when I start doing that, then you start getting scared because like I'm yelling, and then you get even more mean because that's your response for when you're scared.
So it's a hot mess.
But again, everything I just described, right? Like I know about you that when you're scared, you get angry. That's your go-to. When you're fearful, when you're unsure, you start to get angry.
Yeah.
And so now, because I know this about you, because we've had so much time to communicate about it, because we've been in so many therapy sessions together, it's because of foster care, because of all these things, I know when you're starting to get really mean to just ask, hey, what are you afraid of?
Yeah.
What's bothering you? What are you anxious about? And then that shifts the entire mood, because then one, it even gets you to recognize, oh, I am scared. And then it's like, well, you're doing this next week and I'm kind of worried about it, or this is going on right now, or something's happening in your immediate world that maybe I wasn't aware of yet, and you've been kind of trying to figure it out. And like, well, actually this situation's going on, it's really got me upset, or it's got me sad, and I don't know what to do about it, or I'm scared I'm not gonna have this person in my life anymore, or there's health things going on with mom, dad, all that kind of stuff can be what's causing it. But if we don't have good communication, right, I immediately assume, well, it's about me.
Yeah.
and it's not really something else. And
well,
so
and also
important.
like that kind of is a part of like catching it low when you catch it small, because if you let it sit there and like fester, like it starts to spread into touch on other areas.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, hey, just being scared about a family member getting sick can now cross over into, our arguments and
Yeah.
things like that, and like they're not even connected,
No.
but it's because I let them be like unresolved and
Yeah.
like just like didn't communicate or process them.
Yeah.
Now they're spreading out and touching
Yeah.
all these other areas.
Well, it's just like just like in the body, a real wound, right? If left untreated, it becomes infected, and the infection will spread, and
Yeah.
and the things literally will rot and fall off.
Yeah.
Like so. I think in the same way in our marriages, if we don't talk about this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think another one too is like, without getting too detailed, but I think important is when we talk about the area of intimacy, right, together, is to actually talk about things.
Yeah.
Like, what do you like? What do you not like?
Yeah, as awkward and uncomfortable as it was at the beginning, it's like, why can't we talk about these
Yeah,
things?
let's not guess.
Let's just
really figure out what
see.
what
like,
we
hey, let's
what we
let's
like.
explore
Yeah.
this thing
Yeah,
or
yeah.
that thing, or it's
Within
like just,
biblical context,
yes,
of course, everybody.
Yes.
but
Yeah.
but yeah,
Calm down.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I think that's important too, and that doesn't get talked about either.
Yeah.
And and I know personally, like of things of just guys that I've known that are married that are just like, oh yeah, no, that's killer. We're killing it. It's killer department. the sex life is killer. And like then you get the other side of it and it's like, oh, actually no, it's not.
Yeah.
And then it's like everything
Yeah.
just kind of falls apart. But again, especially if anybody listening to this, you're especially new in your marriage. I mean, even if you're not, it's better to have the conversation now, but to start asking those questions if
Yeah.
you're not. Like, hey, do you like this? Are you into this? Like,
Yeah.
is this something you enjoy? What do you enjoy?
Yeah. Or can we do something different?
Yeah.
Like to ask these things
Yeah.
instead of just being like, let's just do things
Yeah.
how it's normally been. It's like, no, like
Yeah.
we can.
Yeah. Well, and even in that too situation where you go through different seasons of like, hey, I'm feeling really insecure right now. Or,
Yeah.
I'm not feeling, but to communicate that, because instead it was just more of like, well, I'm not in the mood.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but what does that mean? Like
Yes.
and so that's why, I do love the fact that now you bring a lot of clarity to that of like, I'm not in the mood because
Yeah.
I feel sick or because I've had a horrible day at work. Like I
Yeah.
just want to hang out.
But also, like, this is something that will help me get into the mood
Yeah.
tomorrow. So we will
Yeah.
circle back and
You bet.
Yeah,
I will
so I'm not
totally
just,
circle
like,
back.
ending it. It's like, let's
Yeah.
circle back.
And so again, all these things of talking about, okay, let's talk, right? Like, so
Yeah.
that's the thing is like, let's actually be open and honest communication. One of the things I think we started, probably year 2, maybe, because I don't think it was year 1, but year 2 we started actually, maybe it was year 1. We did do the thing at usually the end of every year. We're coming up soon, July 30th, our
Yeah.
next anniversary of what did you like about this year of marriage and
Well,
what did you
I don't
not
think
like?
we didn't start that until
Was it year 2 or 3?
this year 3, because
Okay.
I heard that this couple on something talk about how they would do like a 5-year like analysis.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so, but we decided to do that every
yearly,
year,
yeah.
a yearly one on our anniversary that we discuss, hey, what did you like about this year and what did you not like?
Yeah.
And
What
what
could be better?
can be better and what should we be intentional on working on in this next coming year?
Yeah.
So we make a plan for the next year of like,
Yeah.
hey, we didn't really do so great in this area. Let's work on it this coming year of being intentional,
Yeah.
to work on certain things. And
Yeah.
I love that we do that because we do that every year on our anniversary.
Yeah. Which is approaching bigger before you know it.
Yes,
So that's going to be fun and
Yes.
exciting. Hope it's been a good year.
it has been. I think so.
But that's the thing I think I've learned really is to stop assuming, and prepare myself to hear that maybe there's something that I thought I was doing really great at that maybe I haven't been,
Yeah.
or maybe I have checked out in certain areas because especially with ministry and what we're doing as well is like it is very all consuming and it can be, and so like recognizing that like hey you've been kind of distracted. But again, not waiting and not just, that's the other thing I think that you've been good at in seasons past with this is like when you feel like you're on the back burner and ministry has more become my mistress, right? Like, as in like, I'm more focused on this than I am with you, is calling that out and saying, hey, like, this isn't cool. Like, I
Yeah.
feel like I'm on the back burner. I need you to make a change.
Yeah, because I have you have given me the marriage card of like,
Yeah.
hey, I call marriage
Yeah.
on this area, so you need to now
Yeah.
not do these things. that
Yeah,
you've-
yeah. You need to stop and you need to bring attention here. And like I've even, I mean, we've even discussed this. I've even told the church this before, that like if for whatever reason it came to a point where it was like, hey, I can't, it's either ministry or me, I'd say, well, that's it. Like, we'll just run away.
to Alaska.
I don't know about Alaska. I don't think I'll make it in Alaska. But we'll just, I mean, like, because that's how much, like, because if I fail in my marriage, it doesn't matter what I've done in ministry, right? And so I think that's it. But so to wrap this up in general, because we have reached time, I think, do you got any final thoughts of like communication, or for like women listening, or even men that are listening, that, of things that you've have found very helpful, or something you think we can continue on that would help, that kind of thing?
I think just circling back on two important things of addressing to women, to not be afraid to tell your husband what you want. And to also keep in mind that because when we were in therapy sessions and stuff, like it talks about how you have to verbalize things. Like you can't just, write them out or text them. Like you have to physically,
which is also biblical,
speak it out of your mouth. And I know that that's very hard for men a lot of times to communicate things, but it's like you have to say these things and get them out to heal. And things like that.
Well, and so to add on your point, to wrap this up, I think being a safe space to do so, because like we can talk all day. Yeah, I want you to communicate with me, but if every time you do, it's like a horrible experience, that's going to discourage anybody from, and that's where you start getting into hiding things. That's where you start getting into things of not wanting to tell your spouse something, of lying. I was actually on earlier today, because I knew we were talking about communication. I was actually thinking about like the last time that I feel like I've actually lied to you. Like I felt the need to lie, and I couldn't remember. And I was like, I don't even think about it. Like in the sense of like, oh, I have to lie to Sydney about this. Like I don't feel that way. So that's one thing I know you've created a really great space for me to always be honest. because that's important. Because even if we have something tough that we have to talk about, like I'm not going to lie, because I know how much that would hurt you. Right. And so, and how much better it is when I just come out with it and say, hey, because of that space. And I hope too, with the way you feel, is like, hey, I can talk to you about these things, and we're going to work through it, whatever it is, So I think final thoughts there. I think that's important, that to make sure you create that safe space for communicating to each other.
Because women, if you're asking your husband to communicate
asking
with
your
you,
man,
and he does, but then you respond badly, like,
he's not gonna keep telling you things.
So you have to. But also, husbands have grace for women. Like, hey, like, I'm sorry I didn't respond that way. Can we try that again? Like, just
be willing to work through it and know you're not going to get it right the first time. This has been many years of practice that we've had now, and it's helped. So anyway, well, guys, we hope you have enjoyed this episode. We talk about communication, and like this video, share, subscribe, and we will catch you next time.